Hi, and welcome to the Social at Scale podcast. I'm Cameron and Bryan, your host and the CEO and co-founder of Everyone Social. This podcast is dedicated to the topic of employee advocacy and how marketing, sales, and recruiting teams use it to drive efficient ROI. Let's get going.
Every company is trying to figure out what return to office means. And notice I didn't say return to work, right? Because people have been working wherever they've been. And I think flexibility and choice are the big things that are going to drive a lot of those decisions. You need some people to show up in an office space or in an environment that are facilities-based, tacticians, people who have to show up in front of your clients. And so there's an element of behavioral expectation there that you're going to have to continue those actions, show up in person, meet with your team. And I think having the flexibility to do that is the biggest driver for at least the future of work in the next over the next decade. Is how are you going to give people the flexibility to have their own balance and integrate their work with their life the way that they need to. So that's first, right? Just the flexibility of work life and that work schedule. And then there's the space. Where do we do it? Do we need to do it in an HQ or headquarters office? Do we need to be in a space where we can connect and do a walk by with a team member or a group of team members? Sometimes I'll admit, sometimes I miss the ability to do that. I miss the ability to have that walk by moment, to have those conversations, to talk about things that don't feel like they're worth an official meeting, but are really important because they add to the elements of connecting with other humans. And we did a focus group recently around, what do we care about now? What are the most important things that we need to do to empower our employees? And got lots of data back around that. But it really depends on expectations. It depends on how they work. And one of the things from a benefit perspective, work from home and time off were by far in the lead for the things that they cared about from a benefits and recognition perspective. They want to be able to work when they can work. They want to be able to work where they need to work, and they want to be able to get together in person when that is advantageous. So they want to be able to have the best of both worlds, and the pandemic has shown us that we should be able to do that.
Yeah, that's interesting to kind of hear that confirmed from your survey, because anecdotally, at a very small sample size, we've been a remote organization since the beginning, so almost going back 10-ish years, and we heard it time and time again, when we bring people on, that just simply the opportunity to do their work from home, and sometimes back when we were largely consolidated in one place in Salt Lake City, we had people that just had long commutes, right? And so even to them, having the flexibility of being able to work X number of days from home was always at the top of their list. And we kind of figured at the time, pre-pandemic, that, well, this is a great kind of advantage to an organization to be able to attract good talent. Was, we're not going to pay a Netflix salary, although Netflix may not be paying Netflix salaries anymore. But we could offer something that some of these other companies couldn't, in terms of flexibility, and I think at the root of it, trust. Any other interesting key findings from the data?
Yeah. So the other another big piece is around equity. So when you think about equitability of these benefits and these experiences, you can't just say, yes, you can show up remotely because you have a Google Meet or Zoom login. So you have to think about, what experience are we offering to one group of employees, meaning the group of employees who are able to come into the office. Are we offering food? Are we offering other benefits, other perks, other things that help them feel connected to the teams that they work with and other related teams, like that they feel connected to the larger initiative, the mission. And then what are we doing to provide that for the people who are remote and who still want and need that connection? So one of the pieces of feedback was our all hands. We typically provide food. There's, the last all hands I walked in and there were breakfast tacos, and breakfast tacos are a big deal in Austin. I'd imagine breakfast tacos are a big deal way beyond Austin, but really good breakfast tacos when you walked into the room. And one of the pieces of feedback that we got from that was, how do we provide maybe not that exact experience, because breakfast tacos don't travel well, but how do we provide that as a benefit to the people who are showing up and listening and giving of their time and their attention? How do we give them food voucher gift cards? Do we do that ahead of time? How do we manage that process? How do we budget for that process? But that's one specific aspect, is you provide all these things, and the I don't want to say lazy, but the muscle memory of this is where we spend these dollars, this is where we invest, is most of the time rooted in the physical office space.
Yeah, no question, out of memory or perhaps convenience or whatever it is. So last time, one of the previous times that we talked about employer versus candidate markets. And, I think you helped to kind of open that window for me, and just kind of understanding, what was the environment that we were in. And I'm guessing that this was probably 2019 ish timeframe. And, at the time, and in retrospect, it seems, very obvious, but I think, you were ahead of it, being someone who's really ensconced in that, in the world of, recruiting, talent brand, et cetera. You said, right now it's a candidate market. What do you think about it right now? What do you think of the landscape? Have we swung towards it being an employer market? Is it easy? Can we think about it in such simple terms? I guess, what's your thought as to how things have changed over the last few months?
Well, I'll tell you the same thing that I tell everybody who asks me about real estate in Austin, Texas, is that the pendulum swings both ways. It's something that has to balance out and correct itself. So when you think about, and it's not as black and white as an employer market or a candidate market. And right now, we have this gift and this curse of getting all the information, most of the time, all the information at our fingertips, and as it happens, relatively speaking. What that means is people tend to hit the panic button and make decisions and judgments and assumptions based upon all the information that we have. Well, the rest of the world takes time to adjust and to think about how those decisions are going to affect the people who aren't as plugged into all the information. So the short version of that is that we panic when we see that there are dozens of companies laying off people. There have been less than 20,000 people laid off, which is horrific, right? When you think about that kind of number, when you think about that in the grander picture of what is the labor market, It's really small. And so while the general assumption is that, we're now no longer in a candidate market, and I don't think that's the case. I think some of these markets have started to correct themselves, and there's a balance, because for a time, and anybody who went through 2021 knows that stuff was crazy, y'all. There were things, buckets of money were being thrown, especially in TA or recruiting. There was a lot of money being thrown around, because it was like, how do we capitalize on this? How do we hire these people? First, it was, we need recruiters, and then recruiters got scarce. And then it was, we need to hire recruitment marketers. And people realized they didn't know what they actually needed or meant when they said we need to hire recruitment marketers. And so that played out across 2021. So I thought that was really interesting, but I don't think the market has fully corrected itself. I think we're still in a candidate-driven market for a lot of the personas and profiles that people need to hire.
Interesting. Okay. So just on the point that you just said about, people were amping up on the recruiting side of things, and then they pushed into recruitment marketing. One of the things we saw from the start of COVID going back, early 2020 was, kind of a similar progression of digital transformation in general, right? And although some companies I think that evolved over time, right? Initially, it was just like, hey, we need to do more. We need to make our salespeople who are stuck indoors, effective as kind of remote sellers or whatever. There's been an evolution of the thinking around kind of what the strategy is as it relates to digital transformation. But what we've seen kind of 2 years on is those things that were adopted, even if a company's viewpoint on that initiative is very different, it's left a mark, right? It's kind of brought everyone forward. We've seen this with social, just with our business. I would say one hallmark that is really exciting for us is over the last 2 years, like executive adoption of social, executive understanding of social has just progressed hugely. And I think that's for a variety of reasons. But, in the talent world, what do you think is going to be the effect or the view going forward as it relates to talent marketing? Do you think that this is more broadly understood? Is it going to be something that perhaps even as the labor market kind of pulls back in certain areas, that it will remain kind of an institutionalized piece of recruiting for most organizations? Or I guess, does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I would lean on our friends across Europe and the UK who have been living with this profession and this practice for longer than we have. It becomes part of the process. It becomes an expectation. I hope, and I hope I'm not wrong, but I also hope that what's going to happen is our expectations for what good looks like and the messaging and how these opportunities are packaged and the weight of social capital. So when you think about the stories that are shared, you think about review sites and all the ways that we collect these stories about what people experience, how they experience it, where they're working, what the companies believe in. All of these things have continued to step up in the level of excellence and the level of transparency. And we have changed the candidate market, because now people know that the answers are out there.
That's a great point.
They know that the truth is out there. For those of you who lived through the 90s,
right?
And we're fans of the X-Files, the truth is out there, and it's a matter of understanding how to look for and find it.
Okay, so that I think is a super interesting view, is that it's not just kind of a competitive advantage for the organization who needs to recruit, but it's become an expectation on the part of the candidate as well, right? Like, yeah, take two companies, take one that does a really great and kind of authentic job with recruitment marketing, and then take another that, doesn't necessarily have a mature function, and the level of attractiveness from a candidate perspective is going to be very stark. I think that's a particularly interesting take. So speaking of recruitment marketing, what are the keys? Well, first of all, I saw your post on there's 140 different titles for, employer branding recruitment. Is there anything?
190.
Where are we at with that?
190.
Okay.
So we're now at 190, over 190 different titles for recruitment marketers. So when you think about employer brand, talent brand, recruitment marketing, talent marketing, all of these different variations, we don't know what the hell to call ourselves. We're so confused because everybody found their way to this profession in some way or another, and there's nobody setting the standard for what this means, what success looks like, what kind of education, what performance really means. So the successes that you see are highly relative across the market by company, by size of company, by industry, and a lot of times by the proficiency and the expertise that that person has in that role to tell a really good story and get the data around what success looks like. So over 190 different job titles means that people are doing this work and they don't know what this work should really be.
Do you find, is there inconsistency not only in the titles but the standard of work, or is the work more consistent but people just call it different things?
Yes. I would say there's a wide chasm of work. I think the chasm is smaller on the work itself than it is around the terminology. But I would say that success is relative. If you have in your mind what somebody should be doing in the role of the talent brander, and they do 80% of what you had in mind, then you might be happy. But if you talk to someone else who understands that 80% of what they thought was acceptable or successful was only half of what somebody could be doing or should be doing, based upon the demands, based upon the talent, based upon the market, based upon a lot of generally accepted marketing principles, well, then you might not think them quite as successful. And there's very few standards that can be applied toward that. So what we're trying to do at Talent Brand Alliance is actually provide some consistency, provide some standards, and ultimately provide some education and certification so that people know what they're getting and they understand how they should be hiring for this role, as well as how people should be thinking about the questions that they're asking their employer. I think that's one of the hardest parts, to know that you're interviewing your future boss as well.
How do you think about, I mean, as you're working with Talent Brand to to kind of help to progress everyone, what is your view of kind of basic standards of success? I mean, if you were the arbiter of any number of talent brand marketers at organizations that you're familiar with, is like kind of, what do you consider to be, table stakes as far as what they should be doing, what that strategy looks like, how to validate it from a kind of a reporting standpoint as well?
Well, the three biggest pieces of success are going to be: do you have an employer brand strategy around messaging and the experience that your employees actually have, right? Do you have that package? Do you have that set of instructions, or EVP, or people promise, as we would call it? That's step one, and has to be socially validated internally. It has to make sense. It has to be activated among the employees who are living that story. Then you have to have the drumbeat of how do we build the brand. So how are we putting the brand out there in the ways and the places that it can have the most impact among people who are trying to find out, and among the people who don't know why they should care who the company is as an employer? That's the second piece. The third piece is, are we taking the relevant aspects of that branding message and putting it in front of the right people who are ready to hear it? So that's when you think about the recruitment marketing and advertising side, the people who are either searching for jobs or who are in specific channels, that showing up with the right message, telling them that there is an opportunity, there is a chance for them to take the next step. There's a chance for them to learn more. There's a chance for them to have a better boss. There's a chance for them to change their surroundings and learn and grow. And it's right here. And if the targeting is done right, then that makes that next step that much easier for them to take on their own.
What, is, I know you're connected with you guys have a really strong community with Talent Brand, and, of course, everyone that, you're personally connected with. What examples or things have you seen out there, be they named examples or not, of things that have just worked exceptionally well, that perhaps have surprised you over the last year?
I would say that there's a couple of companies, or there's one that I would say that not everybody knows about, and the other one is really, really is like a Fortune 5 company, and that's CVS. So if you think about what CVS is doing, the kind of people that over the last couple of years, as you can imagine, there's a high demand for people who do this work, whether it's you're in the stores, or you're a healthcare provider, or you work at or you work at one of the companies that they own, right? That the umbrella company owns. And so you have to tell that story in a relatable way. And one of the things that I saw as an example was a job ad that looked like a CVS receipt. Now, for those of you who's never been to a CVS receipt or CVS store and had a CVS receipt, it tends to be a long thing. It tends to be a bit of a Dead Sea Scroll of paper. And that's one of their promotional items. It's like, you're here, here's information. We know that you need the information. We know you're probably going to hang on to this receipt. So I even joked with one of their recruitment marketers, and I said, this seems way too short for a CVS receipt, but I love the idea. And so it's just taking the elements of experience that your customers, and also, in this case, there's going to be a big overlap with your candidates, taking an element of that and also kind of poking fun at yourself, tongue in cheek, to say, hey, we realize that, this is your experience. Let's play off on that so that you know who we are, but you probably have never thought of working for us or adding your skills and your gifts to our goals and our mission. So that's one. And the one that you might be familiar with, but not a lot of other people, I see in the general sense, is HubSpot. So HubSpot does a great job of telling their story in a unique and genuine way, and thinking about it from a human perspective. And so they do a lot of things around how and where they expect you to work, and what that experience is going to look like, and their benefits. And there's so much content. Now, full disclosure, they're marketers. Their platform is a marketing platform, right? So but we can take a page from that and say, how are we thinking about our message as we approach the market? Are we telling the story in the way that people hear it? Are we talking about the things that resonate? And so HubSpot does a great job of telling a lot of those stories, doing it in a creative way that also takes advantage of their product, their marketing platform. And then that doesn't just solve the problem. You have to actually tell a good story. You have to show up and tell a story that resonates on whatever platform you use.
Yeah, it's just kind of on that note. I think a lot of times, and this isn't going to surprise you, but we've worked with or been involved, both of us have been involved with larger companies. For us as our customers, for you being at Indeed and even Workrise with, hundreds of employees now, is a sizable organization. And a lot of times I think there's I've had this view in the past that kind of, something as specialized as employer branding, talent branding, that sounds like something that would be difficult, costly for a smaller organization to adopt. And as you know, we've grown our organization pretty significantly over the last 12 to 18 months. And we, kind of, to use your where do you sit on this standard spectrum of kind of 0 to 100% good? We weren't at 100%. We were probably well below that, right? In terms of how someone like you might analyze our approach to talent branding and marketing. But wow, it had such an impact, on our ability to attract folks, even while all these bags of money were flying around over 2021, and to talk about kind of the unique advantages and story that we have as an organization. Anyway, it was astonishing. It was one of the I think the strongest impacts that we've seen from kind of a dedicated function in our organization, and for us at least, by using our own product to facilitate that.
That's what I was going to ask, is how did you go down that path? What did you look at it just from a product perspective, or did you say, hey, What do we tell our clients that they need to do? How do we, were you taking some of your own medicine and advice? What happened?
Definitely. And it's a great question. I mean, we work with some organizations that are, to your point about 20,000 people being, laid off over the last, X number of months. I mean, we have single clients who are looking to hire more than that, over the course of the next 6 to 9 months. And so some of the, I would say, employer branding, whatever we want to call it, talent marketing, absolutely one of the hottest use cases that we've seen over the last, call it 6 to 9 months. I think we're curious to see how that continues. I feel like maybe companies are just kind of toning it down a little bit, in part not to perhaps seem insensitive to those that are having to make some hard decisions. But I was just looking at a bunch of data from our clients this morning, and I mean, the activity occurring on the recruiting side, not only just open roles and the use of our product to fill those, but also hiring more recruiters and hiring employer branding, employer marketing folks continues to continue at a pretty good clip. For us, again, we just, there's nothing that forces you to figure something out and kind of a hard need. And for us, we had to fill X number of roles. And for us, social is really kind of our native platform. Certainly, we were doing job postings on LinkedIn. That's actually where we really centered all of our postings over the last year. That was kind of our primary platform. And but at the same time, highlighting those who had just joined our company, highlighting stories of those who've been with us for a while. And I think, again, kind of to your point of flexibility and what people are really looking for, that's a whole nother advantage of being a remote organization. Is I think it kind of irons out potential kind of it creates a more, at least the opportunity for a more diversified story set. Because people live in different places, they're doing different things, they have families, and all of this kind of blends together, I think, a little bit more when you're working from home. And of course, that's those are all things that we'd love to highlight and love to communicate to others, that like, look, if this is what you're looking for, this could be a great opportunity for you.
It removes an objection. So when you're looking at a candidate, you're likely looking at them going, okay, what are the things, how am I screening out or am I screening in? Right. Well, candidates are doing the same thing. And so they're looking at your roles and they're looking at your company and they're saying, why should I not be interested in this company? Or what are the triggers that are important to me that this company helps me say yes to? So
yes,
so if you remove the obligation of no, you have to be in St. Paul, Minnesota, then you open up a lot of things. You also open up the question around compensation. What are we paying? All those there's all, it makes it slightly more complex when you think about that layer, but you open up to way more people who could successfully do the role and who could click with your teams and who could add more to your capabilities than if you're only looking in that region or in that city. And so they're qualifying you. The candidates are qualifying you, and you want to remove that objection, just like you would want to in any sales process.
Totally. I could keep talking to you, Bryan, about all this stuff. I always enjoy our conversations, and just your way of thinking about things. Just as a final question for this time, and slightly off topic, but I'm always curious. We were talking at the outset, we're both parents, we both have 2 kids. How have you, managed being a dad of 2 young kids, working at home perhaps most of the time? What's worked for you over the last year, and how have you found success with that?
Well, lots of things have contributed to whatever success looks like, right? Success is getting through it at this point. And for me, the one of the biggest things that I could say is finding the right partner, finding a partner, whomever that is, to help balance out the times when you need more, and the ability to focus on themselves when you need less, and you can contribute more to the family dynamic, whatever that family dynamic looks like. So having a great partner is the requirement number one to be able to get through it, and not everybody does, and I realize that. But also having a flexible workplace where you can say, hey, camera's off now because and muted from time to time because my 3-year-old is playing with his monster trucks in my office because my wife has a doctor's appointment or is getting her hair done, or whatever the case may be. And having the ability to do that, having the ability to block off time and step away, and then having the ability to step back when you can, if you need to be able to step back once the kids are in bed and say, now I can think about this. Now I can come back to this. I needed time. I needed to focus. And if there's one thing that kids know, it's when you're not paying attention. So the ability to devote your focus to the things that are most important when you need to. I think that's the one of the biggest takeaways, is having the people around you that give you the space to do that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your thoughts on that. Yeah, I similarly, I think it's a whole new set of things, to figure out, from a relationship partner dynamic to a kid dynamic, right? When the routine is no longer getting up, going to the office, coming home early evening, and kind of having this, tried and true, or at least kind of familiar way of doing things. But I appreciate your thoughts on that. I know this is kind of the time that we booked. So Bryan, I want to appreciate you making time. It's great to connect. I'd love to talk further with you about, this stuff, or, anything else, maybe check in and, a quarter or two. I think it'd be great to circle up on some of the things that you're working on, not only at Workrise, but Talent Brand as well.
Absolutely. And I don't, whether you want to include this or not, we have Talent Brand Summit coming up in Chicago, where I always love learning from the people who are doing this work. So we're going to be doing that again in October. And we're planning things out for the future in Amsterdam and Nashville and beyond. So really getting energized by the people who are doing this work, sharing and learning from each other, as well as learning from people like you who are contributing to this ecosystem and beyond, right? Understanding that it takes a lot of things, not the least of which is the ability to reach out and tap our employees and help share their stories. So I appreciate the conversation.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Social at Scale podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please be sure to subscribe. If you didn't enjoy it, please let me know. You can access past episodes on our site at everyonesocial.com/podcast. As always, please feel free to connect with me directly on Twitter or LinkedIn, and look forward to seeing you next time.